When people think of financial crashes, just picture the Great Depression of 1929, or maybe the 2008 collapse that shook the global economy. But there was another crash once so devastating, so transformative that it changed the very meaning of money itself. It's a story few remember today, yet every dollar, every debt, every modern financial system still carries its shadow. This is the story of the forgotten crash that changed money forever. The calm before the storm. At the dawn of the 18th century, Europe was alive with ambition. Nations were competing for colonies, trade routes, and resources. But power was no longer measured only in armies and land, it was measured in credit. For the first time in history, governments began realizing something extraordinary. They could create money from promises. In the early 1700s, this idea took physical form in France. Under a Scottish economist and gambler named John Law. Law was brilliant, charming, and dangerous, a man who believed that paper could replace gold, and confidence could replace reality. And for a brief, glittering moment, he was right. John Law's dream. In 1716, France was drowning in debt. Decades of war under King Louis XIV had left the treasury empty. Gold and silver were scarce. The government was desperate. John Law arrived in Paris with a revolutionary idea. Create a national bank that could issue paper money backed not by gold, but by trust, by the promise of the state itself. The Banque Generale was born. People could deposit metal coins and receive paper notes in exchange. Notes they could trade, spend, or save. It was faster, easier, and felt modern. Soon after, Law founded the Mississippi Company, a venture claiming vast riches in the French colonies of North America. He promised that this company and France's new paper money would make everyone rich. And the French believed him. The paper gold rush. In Paris, the mania exploded. Ordinary citizens, nobles, even priests, sold everything they had to buy Mississippi Company shares. Paper money flowed through the streets like water. The rich got richer overnight. A new middle class emerged. And the myth spread that wealth could be created, not from labor or land, but from credit and speculation. Law's experiment seemed unstoppable. The French economy boomed. Prices soared. People spoke of a new golden agent till they realized there was no gold left behind it. The crash. By 1720, the illusion shattered. When investors tried to exchange their paper notes for gold, the bank couldn't deliver. Confidence collapsed overnight. Crowds stormed the bank. Shops refused paper money. Fortunes vanished in days. The Mississippi Company, once valued higher than all of France, was worthless. And John Law, once the most powerful man in Europe, fled Paris disguised as a woman. Aftermath. The crash destroyed not just fortunes, but faith in money itself. People buried their paper notes. Merchants demanded only gold or silver again. For decades afterward, the very idea of paper money was seen as a scam, a trick of the powerful. But the seed had already been planted. Because while France turned away from credit, the rest of the world was watching. Across the English Channel, Britain studied what had gone wrong and decided to do it better. Where Law had failed through excess and illusion, Britain would succeed through discipline and control. This moment, this forgotten collapse, gave birth to the modern banking system. Birth of central banking. In the aftermath of France's disaster, the Bank of England quietly rose to dominance. Founded earlier in 1694, it now became the model of stability. Its power came not from gold and vaults, but from trust in the state, the promise that government debt was as good as money itself. This was the turning point. Money was no longer tied to metal. It was tied to debt. Every pound, every note, every bond represented a claim on the future, on taxes yet to be collected, labor yet to be done, wars yet to be fought. The crash that destroyed France had taught Britain one crucial lesson. Control the credit and you control the empire. The new age of debt, like the mid-10th century, Britain used its new financial system to fund global wars and colonial expansion, while other nations went bankrupt trying to pay for armies. Britain simply borrowed from its own citizens through government bonds. Investors bought these bonds because they trusted the system. Banks multiplied them through lending. And suddenly, Britain could project power on a scale the world had never seen, fueled not by gold mines but by paper promises. The irony? The same system that had destroyed France now became the engine of the British Empire. The Invisible Revolution. This was a quiet revolution, no gunfire, no copes, just numbers on parchment. But it changed everything. Factories, ships, armies all financed not by cash, but by credit. Money became abstract, an idea of value, not a thing of value. And as the centuries passed, this system spread across the world. Each nation built its own version, each crash refining it further. But deep beneath every economy, every bank, every paycheck, still lies the same fragile foundation: trust. Trust that the paper or digital numbers still mean something. Forgotten, but not gone. Today, the Mississippi bubble is almost forgotten. It's rarely taught in schools, barely mentioned in financial history, yet it was the moment humanity learned a dangerous lesson. That confidence can create money, and fear can destroy it overnight. Every modern financial crisis, from 1929 to 2008, echoes the same story. We build systems of belief, layer upon layer of promises, until the weight becomes too much, and everything collapses back to reality. Because in the end, money is not metal or paper or pixels. It is trust. And trust, once broken, takes generations to rebuild. Excellent. The rise of the bankers. After the collapse of John Law's experiment, the world learned that whoever could control credit could control power. And soon a new class of rulers emerged, not kings, not soldiers, but bankers. In London, Amsterdam, and later New York. Families like the Rothschilds, Barings, and Morgans became the invisible architects of empires. They financed wars, built railroads, and rescued governments. Nations that once fought each other on battlefields now competed for loans. Gold became the illusion, debt became the weapon, and slowly, the world's financial power shifted from royal palaces to boardrooms. The empire built on promises. By the 19th century, Britain's empire stretched across the globe. But its might wasn't built on soldiers alone. It was built on bonds, pieces of paper promising repayment, backed by faith in the British government. Each war, each colony, each expedition was financed through this invisible machine of debt. And every pound borrowed, returned, multiplied through interest, trade, and taxes. This was the true genius of the system born from France's failure. It taught the world that money could be infinite as long as belief was maintained. But belief is fragile. The Panic of 1873. In 1873, another crash struck. It began in Vienna, spread to London, then crossed the Atlantic to New York. For the first time, the modern financial system experienced what we now call a global recession. Banks failed. Companies collapsed. Governments panicked. The world had become interconnected, and that meant one nation's debt could infect the entire planet. It was the first glimpse of a truth we still live with today. When credit breaks, everything breaks. Gold, the last illusion. To restore order, nations turned back to gold. They believed that tying paper money to a fixed amount of gold would prevent chaos. It was called the gold standard, a promise that every note could be exchanged for real metal. It worked, for a while, but as economies grew, the supply of gold could not keep up. Industrial nations needed more credit, more liquidity, more paper to fuel progress. And slowly, the system that was meant to guarantee stability began to strangle it. By the early 20th century, governments quietly started bending the rules. They printed more money than they had gold to cover. And the illusion began again. 1914, the Great Betrayal. When World War I erupted, the gold standard collapsed overnight. Nations printed endless paper to fund armies, weapons, and destruction. Gold was locked away and promises replaced it. After the war, the world tried to return to gold, but it was too late. The foundation had cracked. The crash of 1929 was not an accident. It was the inevitable result of too much credit chasing too little reality. The forgotten crash of 1720 had repeated itself, this time on a global scale. The birth of the Federal Reserve. In 1913, just before the war, the United States had quietly created something new. The Federal Reserve System, a central bank designed to control credit, stabilize the economy, and prevent future panics. But in truth, it marked the beginning of a new era, where money was no longer created by governments, but by banks themselves through lending. Each loan created new money, each debt became an asset on someone else's balance sheet, and with every financial cycle, the system grew more complex and more fragile. The Great Depression. By 1929, America was living an illusion. Stock prices soared. Everyone borrowed to invest. Paper fortunes multiplied daily. Until one October morning, it all came crashing down. Banks failed. Factories closed. Millions lost their jobs. And once again, confidence, the invisible glue holding the system together, disintegrated. It was a replay of 1720, 1873, and every crisis before. Each time, the same pattern: credit expansion, euphoria, collapse, reform, and repeat. The New World Order. After World War II, global leaders decided to build a financial system that could never collapse again. In 1944, representatives from 44 countries met in Bretton Woods, New Hampshire. There they created the International Monetary Fund, IMF, and the World Bank, and agreed on a new system. The US dollar would be linked to gold, and all other currencies would link to the dollar. It was a brilliant idea, simple, stable, and global, but underneath it relied on one fragile assumption: that America would always have enough gold to back its promises. Nixon breaks the link. By the 1960s, America was spending more than ever on wars, welfare, and global influence. Gold reserves couldn't keep up. Foreign governments began demanding gold for their dollars, and panic spread again. Then in 1971, President Richard Nixon announced a shocking decision. The U.S. would no longer convert dollars into gold. For the first time in modern history, money was completely detached from any physical reality. It became pure belief, pure trust. The forgotten lesson of John Law's crash had come full circle. The age of floating money. From that moment, money became a digital illusion. Its value depended only on confidence, interest rates, and the power of central banks. Nations could print endlessly. Debt no longer had limits, and for decades the illusion worked. Stock markets soared. Global trade exploded. Technology connected the world like never before. But beneath it all, the same system of invisible promises continued to grow bigger, riskier, and more fragile than ever. 2008, the modern collapse. When the global financial system nearly collapsed in 2008, it wasn't because of greed or corruption alone. It was because the same structure that began in 1720 had reached its breaking point again. Banks had created trillions in synthetic credit, debts built upon debts, promises upon promises, until no one knew what was real anymore. When the chain of trust broke, everything froze. Governments stepped in, printing more money to save the system, repeating the cycle once again. The new form of trust. Today, money has entered its final transformation. It exists mostly as digits on screens, moving at the speed of light across the world, and yet its foundation hasn't changed at all. It's still built on confidence, on the belief that when you tap your card, when you check your balance, when your employer pays you, the system will keep its promise. Some say the next evolution will be digital currencies, money without banks, controlled by algorithms or central banks themselves. But the question remains: will this new system finally break the cycle, or repeat it once more? The forgotten lesson. From John Law's paper money in 1720 to today's digital dollar, the story has always been the same. Every generation believes it has mastered money, that it's different this time. But history whispers the same warning. Money is not wealth, debt is not growth, and confidence is not truth. The crash that destroyed France taught us that once trust is lost, no empire, no bank, no digital system can survive. The faces have changed. The technology has evolved, but the game remains the same. Every time we forget that lesson, the cycle resets. So the next time you swipe your card, take a loan, or invest in the market, remember this: you are part of a system born from a forgotten crash, built on invisible promises, and powered by trust alone. History may not repeat perfectly, but when money forgets its meaning, it always rhymes. Because in the end, the real currency of the world is belief.